Beginning right now. And
Okay, now can you hear me? Is it? Yeah, okay, good. Because now, before I used to hear some big background sounds, but now I think, yeah, they're gone. And I just can hear this silence of my home, which is, um, always connecting you so much to yourself because you're used to your home. You know all the sounds in your apartment. You know approximately, if you have neighbors, what time their child will run upstairs, or if you don't have neighbors, maybe you know about what time the birds will come and eat, or pick up some seeds from the roof of your house. You know your home. You really know your place. And this is what I feel right now, that before, for the short moments when I firstly met you, I could hear some of the sounds behind your cameras, and just had a sneak into your homes, just like a small glimpse into your homes, to imagine what you hear, apart from my voice coming from thousands and thousands of kilometers from behind the ocean. And I hope that the internet connection will be good today. If something happens, then I'll try to fix it. But at the moment, I'm using all of my phone battery to to keep us going, and I hope at least half an hour we can get a good connection, and then we'll see if maybe some magic will happen, and the battery will live a longer life than it usually does. Well, thank you, Leah, for this introduction also. And I'm very happy to be invited here. And I would really love to meet all of you and every one of you. And I'm really excited about the work you are doing together with Leah. Because as I had a chance to little bit to look around the Story Sanctuary, I was getting this feeling like, yes, this is exactly what I was imagining, and I was also trying to recreate here on our side of the ocean and in my home country. So, as Leah said, I live in Estonia, and I was born also here in Estonia. So, if you imagine Europe and the northern Europe, where there is Scandinavia, this dragon or snake-like looking Scandinavia, and just behind, or just under the neck of the snake of the Sweden and Norway, there is these three Baltic states: Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So I'm the northern one in Estonia. And as you have morning now, but here in Estonia, it's deep evening. And the more we go into today's session, and the more we go into storytelling, the darker and the more late it will be for me. So I wish I could also put on the background some one of my windows, that you can see some very nice surroundings around, because although I live in the city, my house is the last one in the city. It's a very beautiful natural place with a big lake nearby and lots of trees nearby. So you could see beautiful landscape, but it's dark. It's like really, really deep, deep dark, because in winter we usually get about 5 hours of light, because that's how far north we are. And in December, around the winter solstice, it's coming about 3.5 or 4 hours, which is the all the light you can get. And the rest of the time, you have to live in darkness. Well, of course, nowadays it's easy. We have these lamps, so I had to bring all my lamps into closer to the camera. Otherwise, you would see this shimmering image and will not see me. But here behind the camera, there are different lights that I'm using here. And unfortunately, well, it's not the daylight, but it's electric light. Well, but this is the best I could do today for this session. And yes, although I was born in Tallinn and I live in Estonia, my roots, all of my roots, they are coming from Russia. Because as you can see from my surname, Tserkassova, I am ethnically Russian, although my parents then immigrated to Estonia. and I was born in Estonia. So here in Estonia, we have two languages, Estonian and Russian, so I'm bilingual. And then I'm lucky also to have an opportunity to do storytelling in English, and I always hope that in the right flow, the words would come by themselves. And the place where all my relatives come from, it is situated in the middle of Russia. So it's about 300 kilometers down from Moscow to the south. So it's much more southern place, where there is light, so much more light, where there are watermelons, and where there are samovars. As you can see here, you know it probably. This is a real samovar, real Russian samovar. So I decided to bring it today. Actually, it's he. To bring him today. He has also a name. Well, his name is Yashka, which would be translated as Jacob. That's the samovar Jacob, because every samovar in the family would have his, sometimes her, but mine is a boy. So he would have his own name, and it's totally working samovar, and I'm using it every summer. With my family, we're using it in the summer. So you put some wood inside here. So there is a small kind of top. You take it away, you put some wood inside here, you close it, and you put also some matches, some burning paper, and then it starts to boil, and it makes really very tasty tea. So here you make only the hot water, and then you add some brewed tea into the cup, and later you add some hot water from here. So this samovar, it comes exactly from the place where my family comes from, and this place is called Tula. So not to be mistaken with the Celtic Thule, the mythical land of Thule, where lots of legends are coming from. And no, this is a town called Tula. And as Leah also told you, I'm coming from the lineage of storytellers, because my mother, when she was young, she was a very beautiful woman, and she was a very bright woman, and she knew a lot of stories. So usually there were many people coming to her and she would tell stories, also to children and sometimes to grown-ups. It was approximately at the end of the 60s, the beginning of 70s. So when the storytelling as kind of very nowadays becoming very popular tendency and tradition, and even kind of one of the scenic art forms, it wasn't so popular yet, actually, and only the grandmothers, they were telling stories, they would do storytelling. And as storytelling came maybe later in the 70s in the USA and in England as well, then in Russia it wasn't so common yet. It was just something that grandmothers would do, and they would tell stories to their children. So my mother, she started telling stories, and she knew also a lot of songs. So she has very, very beautiful voice, and she can sing beautiful songs. But at that time, when she was still a young maid, a young maiden, there were many young men who wanted to become her husbands. And every day they would come to her house, at least nearby the house, and they would stay under her windows. Nearly they would form a queue there, waiting when she will let them in, and to have a small talk, to have a conversation, and maybe she would like them. So and another young man would come in. My mother, the first question she asked the young man when she met them, she asked them, "Can you tell a story?" And the young man For example, he was taken aback. He would try to remember something, he would scratch his head and try to remember any story that his mother or grandmother would tell him when he was a small boy. And he remembered something, about this little girl who was just as tiny as a thumb. What was her name? And he would start telling the story. And my mother, she would listen a bit and say, okay, thank you. And sing me a song now, please. And don't be afraid. If it's a famous song, then I will sing with you. The boy, the young man, well, it wasn't what he was expecting, He came there to meet a girl, to impress her, to take her as his wife. But the girl was asking to sing or to tell a story. Why? So the young man, he's looking at the girl, is beautiful, really nice, and also probably she would take good care of the home or the house. And the young man will start to squeeze some voice out of him, making a song or another. And my mother, she would listen a bit and say, okay, thank you. Let's go and drink some tea better. And she invited him to the kitchen. There was a samovar on the table with hot water. And she would bake cakes, and she would put some cakes on the table, and she would put some soft gingerbread, because the town of Tula is very famous for its gingerbread, but not this dry gingerbread you eat for Christmas, but this more soft one, and it always has some natural honey inside. So she would bake this real gingerbread, and then she would listen. She would just sit there and also ask some strange questions. For example, my mother would ask this young man, tell me, is there someone living on the moon? And tell me, what do you think, what kind of music they play under the sea, deep down on the bottom of the sea? And where do we come from? And where are we all going? These kind of questions. So the young man, well, he had to think of some answers, and he was always wondering, like, what's going on? Why is she asking these stupid questions? But my mother, she would sit there listening. She would say some words, maybe also add something. And so the time would go, and the evening would come, and the samovar is already empty. And my mother, she would start sending the young man back home. She would give some cakes to him and some soft gingerbread to take along with him, to take back home. But she never gave her hand. And then one day, my father came. Yes. And my father, well, he's a very clever man. And he also is a good storyteller. And he knows a lot of songs. Just by heart, he can sing one after another. And he knows a lot of poems by heart, beautiful poems that he learned. I know how many, 200, maybe 300, I never know. But he always has a new poem to tell. And he came one day. And also my mother, she invited him. And he would come, but my father, he was clever. He invited also the priest. Yeah. So when my father was telling all kind of stories to my mother, and while he was singing beautiful songs and reciting poems, the priest, he did the ceremony, and now my father and my mother, they were husband and a wife. But my mother, she didn't know it. She was just listening to these beautiful stories, listening to the songs. And only 2 days later, she discovered, oh, gosh, I'm a wife now. And she was only happy about that. And only 5 years later, my mother suddenly discovered that, oh, God, oh, wow, now we live in Estonia. And she was happy about that. And 2 years later, they had a small baby daughter. And the whole family, they were telling stories, they were singing songs, they were reciting poems. And so the baby, this small daughter, she was growing very fast, and she wanted to learn all kind of languages to share these stories and to tell them. And that's me. That's the story of my family, of the places where we come from, and of my lineage. And this is just absolutely true. It's as true as I'm sitting in front of you. And here I have a very small piece of land, a piece of land which comes from Tula, from the place where all my relatives live. Because unfortunately I was grown up without grandmothers and grandfathers. As we came to Estonia, then the perestroika came in the 90s, which was a very difficult period for all of this region. And we couldn't travel much. We couldn't go back. We couldn't travel back to our relatives. I couldn't see my uncles and aunts and several families of relatives, a huge lineage living there. So I was grown without grandfathers and grandmothers. But always in my heart, I had this this longing for a grandmother, or longing for a grandfather, for someone who tells story. Luckily, my parents, they were good storytellers. But when years later, when I was 12 years old, it was the first time when we had a chance to come back to visit for a short time as tourists our historical motherland, our historical native country. It was 12 years later. And when I went there, I took this piece of land back with me. So, you know, it's clay, it's a clay figure, it's a clay bird. And it has some holes in it. So actually, it's a small whistle, which is called an ocarina, just like several other clay musical instruments. It's a clay flute, you can say. But this clay comes directly from the town and from the area where all my relatives come from. And it's actually the smallest ocarina that you can find. I never saw even a smaller one, and it looks like a toy. And usually ocarinas, they look like birds. So let's see what kind of sound it makes. She makes. Yeah, so that's the story of this small piece of land that you can take with you, and that always will connect you back to your roots and to the place where you come from. And this is also a story. The reason why I wanted is to start with this story. Well, I wanted to share a personal story, and I really love this kind of style of the stories, which is very similar to the style of some novels, which is called the mythical realism or mystic realism. This, by the way, this style was very popular also in America, and there are many authors who were writing using this style. And because sometimes, well, maybe one of the first things we do as storytellers is we can tell the stories, the folk stories, the fairy tales, But also I think what is the most important maybe is that we learn to tell personal stories. And I hope this is also what you are experimenting with, and also what you try to do every day to create some small stories from the everyday, from the quotidien surrounding. But somewhat also there is this beautiful style that you can use. It's the mystical realism. And I think it really works with some topics, or with some maybe themes which are connected to maybe historical memory, to a personal memory, and maybe even historical trauma. Because in this region in Estonia here, there was very strong migration during the Soviet times. So a half of the country is Russian speaking, another half of the country is Estonian speaking. But now it became a native state, a nation state. So now it has the main language is Estonian, and children they have to learn Estonian. They have to learn Estonian language. So in the late 90s, in the beginning of the new millennium, there were also some maybe for some people it was also a big issue about the language. So people were put into a situation when they had to learn the language very quickly. And for some people, it wasn't so easy to learn the language. And, it was everything. Well, there are many similar examples. For example, like the Breton language in Brittany. And here in Estonia, it was just the different that the majority language, so which used to be in the Soviet Union, the majority language Russian, it became suddenly a minority language. So it turned from the majority language into a minority language. And for many people, it was a very big problem to have, for example, a Russian surname, or to state, like that, yes, I am Russian, because it was connected to this new period of nationalism in Estonia, and kind of trying to do away with all kind of historic memory, because as a very small state, as a very small country, which didn't have historical maybe kings, big history, some kind of about conquering the world, not having big kings, not having huge heroes in the previous time, and being independent for only less than 100 years. So a huge wave of nationalism arrived. And I saw many young people, when I was invited to do storytelling in schools, for example, that they were really ashamed of being who they are, of having the surname written in the traditional Russian way, and so on. So many people try to change their surnames. They try to speak very quietly in public places Russian, when they would speak in Russian. And they would maybe, some of them, that I know that some people, for example, also some of my acquaintances, they were not answering, for example, their relatives when they were calling them on phone, just being in public places, because they would have to talk in Russian. So it was all in the 90s and the millennium, and then there was a big work which was undertaken by some of the artists, and also when I was doing storytelling in schools, and for children and also for grown-ups. What I was trying to do, I was trying to tell more stories which would connect people to their historical background, to their roots, and try to give these small mechanisms of how you can turn the story into, like, maybe a story which was not comfortable to be told in public, because of this strong way of nationalism, how you can turn it into a beautiful healing story. Also, and you can do it always with some mystical or some mythical elements. And I saw the same kind of style of doing storytelling when I was living in Turkey, because when you go to the Middle East, and for example, you want to listen to the Middle Eastern storytellers, what I love about them is that before telling a story, they would all tell a short poem or a short rhyming story, which is totally ridiculous, which is strange, which is bizarre, which is coming out of context, really. And it was very kind of also at first it was like a real story, like using some realism, and then it would go it would become very mythical, very, very ridiculous, so to say. And it is also a very interesting place that you can do to trick your consciousness, to trick your mind. Because always whenever we start listening, whenever we listen to something, then our mind wants to trick us. And sometimes my mind wants to, go over some corners and not really go into this uncomfortable stories. For example, if you're doing storytelling and telling some stories about relationships, about especially love relationships, or maybe about death, and maybe the topic of betrayal, something, then some listeners, no matter how involved they are, and no matter how they like your story, and if they're following, you'd always have these listeners who are following you, so who are there, who are there to listen, and you would always have listeners who are sitting like that, really shut, and they really don't want your story to enter, and then they're looking at you and like, what you're trying to do, and they're really having this kind of assessive look, and they want to really give a kind of assessment to you. And you would always have people, kind of second difficult category, who are sitting and listening to you like this, always doing this nodding, because they really want to inspire you and support you, because they're so supportive and they know about active listening. So they're sitting there like the Chinese, these Chinese small sculptures, they're nodding head. Or like the Chinese people also, they're always nodding, and they're always smiling, but they would never really take you into their culture and never let you into their economy. But they're always smiling and always nodding. So these kind of two kinds of listeners, the ones who are really shut, the hard candies, and the others who are super supportive. But the problem with these two kind of listeners is that they're both not really listening. This is my experience. And the first one, he's too shut and too much, protective, and not really wanting you to disturb his or her inner world. And sometimes when you're doing storytelling and you're meeting this kind of listener, there's always one in the group, especially when there are many people and who just came to listen to stories. There would be always someone sitting like that. And if by the end of your storytelling, if you do it in the way which I call the soul-centered approach to storytelling, at the end, you would see them softening. You would see that this person, this hard candy, sitting like this, that at the end, something will change in his or her posture, that they would just soften somehow, and the eyes would change. And what concerns the second, not really true listener, this super supportive one, who is taking, this role of just to support you in any situation. maybe he or she was at some courses for active listening, but not the really deep listening, but just kind of I would call it manipulative listening. who just know that whenever you're listening, you have to nod, and or maybe that's another thing which is also communicating to this concept of truth. That some manipulative courses on listening, or like techniques, let's say manipulative techniques of listening, they would say that, okay, if you want to listen to another person, and if you want to make them feel that you're listening, and especially it works in like one-to-one communication, then you have to copy the posture of the speaker. Maybe you've heard about it, that, or at least I don't know, maybe in Wikipedia is how to listen. If you put, they would say something like that you have to copy the posture of the listener. And if she sits like that, you have to also sit like that. If she's doing like something like sitting like this, you also have to sit like that. It does involve our subconsciousness, and it really has an effect, but it is a manipulative effect. And personally, I, as a storyteller and as a person also, I always trying to search for the truth, to keep this pattern and to keep this path of truth, and to do all kind of storytelling in non-manipulative way. So now for a moment, I will continue from here, but I'll tell you a small story in the meanwhile. And I will use this traditional African instrument, which is called a kalimba, which is also the smallest piano you have ever seen. Because surprisingly, but kalimba and the piano, they belong to the same family of instruments. So this is the smallest piano you have seen. And I'll tell you a story which is a true story. I heard it from a person who is the main character of the story, let's say so. That there was a situation, but then I added just a couple of mythical touch to it, and then this is how the story emerged, so to say. But this is just a kind of background and information, just personally for you. Yeah, and then we will continue with listening. A young man who was born in the big city, and he lived all his life in the big city. And his grandfather, he was born in a small village, and he lived all his life in the small village. And once, the young man thought, I should invite my grandfather to see the big city. And so, the young man invited his grandfather, and the grandfather came. And then it was his first evening in the big city, and together they went for a walk. And the big city was really huge. And the buildings were very high, and the big billboards were shining and shimmering. And there were so many cars. And the grandfather was so surprised that the people were somehow hurrying everywhere. They were running and not looking at each other. And suddenly, the grandfather said, "Listen, can you hear the grasshopper?" "Well, what grasshopper? Granddad, well, here's the metal and glass and beton jungle. There are no grasshoppers here. You're not in the countryside." But the grandfather, he came to a small cafe on the corner, which had some green plants in the pots. And he lifted a green leaf, and under this leaf, there was sitting a small green grasshopper playing his beautiful music. "Granddad, how did you hear that?" "Well, that's phenomenal. We have phenomenal hearing. Wow, well, we have to use it somehow because it's a real talent. Wow, how did you hear that?" "Well, everyone is using their talents nowadays, so you have to use it somehow." But the grandfather said, "Oh, no. I'm old. My hearing is not so good anymore. And it's not about hearing here. No, it's not about hearing. It's about listening." And then the old grandfather, he searched in his pocket and he found some coins, some small coins there. And then he threw the coins on the ground, on the pavement. And at the same time, all the people who were walking nearby, they started checking their pockets and checking their purses to make sure whether they or not lost the coin. So the grandfather said, "You see, they didn't hear the grasshopper, but they immediately heard the sound of falling coins." So it's not about hearing, it's about listening, because we hear only the things that we actually want to hear. So that's the story. That's the story I wanted to also to share with you, because whenever we're talking about when we're talking about listening, then there's always this funny thing that people, they will only listen and they will hear only what they want to hear sometimes, and it's really very much very much depends on what they're used to hearing and what they were used to listening to. And so here basically I can give you a perspective of a musician because I'm also playing music, and I can also give you the perspective of a storyteller, because as I told you, for me personally, storytelling is a very important act of healing. It's like it's this, well, the first, maybe its first role. Although you can see that there are many maybe storytelling performances happening here and there, and they're very different contents of the story. But personally, for example, I feel that the storytelling is now has taken the one very important place in the newly secularized world, in the world where people were suddenly displaced from their traditional historical places where they lived. They were very often displaced from their cultures. They were very often had to start to live in this kind of very secular surrounding with people for whom the material world has become the most important, so to say. And this interesting thing is that the revival of storytelling somewhere, yeah, in the 70s, it always coincided with very strong, strong inspiration and very strong this kind of material wave when life was becoming more and more comfortable, when the material good was just so much important for people, and the life became very comfortable. So in a way, the storytellers was taking the place of healer, of a person who would take care of the people, of the soul of the other people, and help them to heal their soul. So so you will always have these two types of listeners that I told you before, and both of them are kind of not really not really following the story. Sometimes it happens because the person is kind of connected to some inner resistance and really not really wanting to let you in. And the other type is who are, this over supportive and also not really paying attention to what you are telling, rather maybe to paying more attention to how you are doing this, and just showing that they are following you. So ideally, I think that the best way to listen and the best way also to do storytelling and to do anything in life is non-manipulative. And these small manipulations, they're so much deep-rooted in us because it's just the way it happened. Very often our parents implemented some manipulative ways of raising us, if they want it or not. It just sometimes it happens, and sometimes we don't know it before we get our children, and we don't know that how manipulative we can get before we actually see how we raise our children. And I feel that now at the moment we're living in a very manipulative world. You can look at the advertisements, at the social media, and the images which are being, very strongly communicated and negotiated. They're also overly manipulative. And the funny thing is that what I always felt is that, well, if you ask me, but isn't storytelling manipulative? Because we have these tricks, and we learn them soon. We have the trick. We know how to take the person, take a listener by the hand, and take him from the beginning point to the, so to say, to the next level, to the place you want to take them. And you're taking them by the hand, and of course you are interfering with their emotions. And in this way, you can say, yes, storytelling is manipulative. And storytelling actually has, I think, the biggest amount, the biggest amount of tools for manipulating with people's emotions and with people's inner states, inner feelings. But now the question is here that but storytellers have very special aim. They're not just doing for the sake of art or for the sake of manipulation, or for the sake of grabbing your audience and really getting them and really holding them, like the Hollywood movies or any movies do. Also you can see storytelling everywhere now, and this is the place where I felt a bit sorry because I see politicians using exactly the same tools that storytellers do, that were always they were ours to use. And the marketing people who are selling goods, they're so good storytellers. And I was always feeling like, wow, you can open your social media and you can see the advertisements there, and maybe every other advertisement would say, oh, I will teach you to write the best posts, I will teach you storytelling, the social media storytelling. But they're never asking you, why do you want to do it? So they're just selling this good and selling these tools of storytellers. But there is always this aim missing, the purpose missing. The politicians, they don't want really to take care of most of them, and it's so much more connected with the personal career and personal growth and personal aims. And this is only probably the Hopi Indian people who would evaluate the leader if the leader can make decisions, can take decisions, knowing how they will influence 7 generations in advance. So this is the kind of measurement. So if you can take a decision and you know that this decision will influence 7 generations after you, then you have to kind of try to predict and to see if it's a good decision or not. So this is with measurement for the Hopi native people. And mostly you don't see it anymore. So personally, I was feeling very sad about that. That's storytelling is not anymore done by storytellers, but everyone else. So when I was telling stories, then I always saw that the stories that I tell, they always want to do something there deep inside your soul, and this is the moment when I thought about this idea of soul-centered storytelling. And of course it happens in the most beautiful way when there are just people physically sitting around you, and what you can do, what you can really try to do, what I try to do there, is that I look at the listeners. And one thing I do, I never have the program, so to say, the program planned, the stories that I'm going to tell. I tried really honestly to do the program, because some places where who invited me, for example, in some institutions, they asked me, but what kind of stories are you going to tell? We need a program. Well, please send us the list. And I always refuse, because it doesn't work this way. Because you come to the people, you meet your listeners, and somehow, if you really try to tune yourself, so to say, tune your soul into compassion, this is how I call it, and really to try to get this compassion kind of love towards them. Then you will feel also maybe even feel their feelings. You'll very easily read them and read what is happening. Then what kind of stories need to be told. And as for the last 5 years, I'm mostly doing only storytelling in different places and in schools, and also for grown-ups in different institutions. Then I see how it really magically works, that you don't know which stories you're going to tell, and you just see the need for the stories. You just look at the people and see what kind of stories need to be told. But yeah, probably it's a bit more complicated in Zoom, because here, well, most of what I see is just a couple of boxes on the screen. But it is a very beautiful, kind of inner tuning that you can use to go there and to meet other people and to see, to feel, to sense what kind of stories need to be told. And then you can always also make some kind of, if you really want to do this kind of healing storytelling, and this is basically what I do, the soul-centered storytelling, then So you're kind of doing it from the position of an elder, and you really have to take responsibility. And this is the point which is not really taken by the politicians, the marketing people, and the people who are using the tools of storytelling, but not doing the work, the work, the healing work, the work for the work for showing other ways, other possible ways of communicating, other possible ways of dealing with problems, with situations, with your memories, history, whatever. So what you can do basically here, I think, is there are maybe two ways. You can always practice this kind of compassion. That's just the state of compassion. I'm not really fond of this kind of very meditative approach. You just concentrate maybe on some part of your body, because sometimes it's the line is very narrow here, and sometimes you can just fall into this very comfortable state of meditation and kind of very safe place you have inside of you. But the life, it always asks you for awakeness. So if you can find this beautiful line, the balance between staying in your present, but at the same time staying very awake for what's going around, then this would be just perfect. And it works both ways. When you are a storyteller, when you are a teller, and you try to navigate among the feelings of the people and see which stories need to come up, and it works perfectly when you are a listener and you are listening to other stories without overprotection and without blunt nodding, but also just staying present. And here, what I wanted to also share with you is a small perspective of musician, because it's very interesting if you ask some musicians how do they listen, and it's interesting what they answer. But the funny thing is that most of the professional musicians, they are not aware of how they listen, and to be honest, many musicians, for them it's a very big challenge to play together in a group, to play as an ensemble. There are not many musicians who are really good at it, and the next level is improvise when you are playing in a group, in an ensemble. So I will continue from that after a short while, and I would just play one instrument for you, which comes from Lithuania. It's close to Estonia. It's one of the next countries, but a bit more south. And it's called the birbine. It's a woodwind instrument. It has a reed like a clarinet, and it has a horn at the end. And it's the great grandfather of a clarinet, let's say so. And the thing, there was also a funny story when I went to pick up this instrument, because most of the instruments that I have, that I'm using, that I play, they are traditional instruments, and you can't find them in many places. And I'm not ordering via Amazon, so to say. So my approach is to come to the place, to meet the master, to learn from him as long as I can. And this is how my main work as an anthropologist supported me, because we do field work, we do ethnographic field work, and then I had a chance to live in some countries for a while, mostly in Turkey, but yes, in some countries as well. So all the instruments that I play, I brought them directly from the masters, and this has a special value for me. So I went to Lithuania by bus. I had a couple of weeks there, and then I wanted to meet the master who makes these instruments. So I went there, and I went to a small town called Kaunas. It has two beautiful lakes flowing, two beautiful rivers flowing in this city, and then there is one place where they meet, and you can have this kind. You see there kind of a half island, a kind of delta of the river, of two rivers flowing together. So we met there with the master, and we met. I came to his workshop, and he showed me this instrument, and I was really, you know, and I always, I'm so inspired by instruments, and I go, oh God, it's so beautiful. It's really amazing. It's made of wood, you know, and 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 I asked the question. I asked the master, but please, can you tell me whose horn is it? Like the horn of which animal is it? And the master, he looked at me like, what? How is it possible that you don't understand? You know, like looking at me. How did you not understand? And he told me, you see, there's only one horn, right? It's a unicorn, of course. So this is the moment when I realized that, well, this is a real master, you know, because not only he knows stories and legends, but he has also a good humor, a good sense of humor. And he's one of the two masters living now who can make these instruments. They're both already quite old, and they are the last ones who can make these instruments, the Berbina. There's also a small factory which is making these instruments, but they are making them out of plastic, you know, just blunt plastic. But there is wooden horn, so it's a unicorn's horn, as you see. And yeah, and by the way, both of these masters, they are both looking for students because they want to, you know, give this this art, convene this art to the new generations. So if anybody of you, just I have to tell you, because if anybody of you wants to become a woodwind instrument master, if you want to come to Lithuania, let me know. I can give you contacts. I think this old man Egidius, he would be very happy to get another student. Yes, so some instruments are very lucky, and some very famous musicians play these instruments, like, for example, Iranian master Kayhan Kalhor, who is playing the beautiful this kemanche, Iranian instrument that he's performing in New York Opera House in the radio hall in many places. But for some instruments, they were not so lucky, and although they are also just amazing instruments, but there are not many masters anymore. So I play a little bit. just a small piece, a small improvisation on one melody which is about 2,000 years old and which is coming from Israel as an old hymn telling the story of how beautiful is the city of Jerusalem. And in the refrain, it says that, "Oh, my heart, my dear heart, please wake up. Please wake up, my heart." And actually in Estonia, we have one folk song from the 14th century, which also has nearly the same lyrics. "Oh, my dear heart, wake up, wake up, wake up, be awake, my dear heart." And so maybe one of my most strongest experiences with listening was taking place in Turkey, where I lived over a year in Istanbul, and I was doing my research on Sufi practices. So Sufis are this is a mystic mystic kind of group of people in Islam, a mystic line of Islam, for whom listening is very important. And the interesting thing that I discovered there while I was participating in their practices, so I was playing music, and I was also doing the whirling, the Sufi whirling practices. And the interesting thing is that this whirling practice, you probably saw this white dervishes whirling ecstatically in these beautiful places. It is called a sema dance, sometimes they call it, but it's a sema. And sema in Persian, it actually means listening. So it's interesting that a physical act that you're doing, and it's rather maybe takes you to think maybe about the body, the embodiment, the movement. It's so physical, it's the whirling, it's very requiring a lot of physical strength and good preparation also, just to make you able to do it, and do it for a long time also. But it means actually listening. And this is interesting because a sema, or this whirling practice, it always happens with music, and there are musicians sitting there and playing instruments. Also like this one, they have also very similar instrument to this one, and I was playing mostly this instrument there. They're playing different flutes, reed flutes, and also bow instruments, and some percussion. And they're playing these Sufi hymns with also very deep spiritual meaning and with words. So and of course it would take me a lot of time for me to tell you more about Sema, and I would just can lose myself telling more in depth about this whirling practice. But maybe one small interesting thing about it is that when a Sema Zen, or a whirler, the Sufi, the dervish who is whirling, when he or she is doing this practice, the only thing he or she can rely on is music. It's the only thing that he or she can rely in this world, so to say, is the sound. And interesting that the Sema is usually taking place in the round hall. And if you go to Turkey, if you go to Istanbul, then you would see this kind of touristic semas, because officially Sufism is prohibited in Turkey. Yes, yeah, after 1925, when Atatürk came to power, he prohibited Sufism totally. Also in Iran, Sufism is prohibited, and everything is happening, but so to say underground. There are masters, they're Sufi whirling practices, but everything is kind of say either for tourists, either just saying that, oh, we have this practice and you can see and you can go and take pictures. But the musicians who are participating there, and the whirlers, they say that it's a prayer for them. It's still a prayer. So there is this circular room, and the musicians, they sit in one particular corner in one area of this room. So whenever the whirler is whirling and go into this ecstatic kind of emptiness, the very empty state of mind, and also staying in very much like pivoting in the present, because he or she cannot lose this movement, cannot lose the spots, because they can't move around. You have to whirl on the spot. So the only thing that he can or she can rely on is this sound, is this music, the musicians playing these beautiful melodies, and the singers who sing these verses about quest, about searching for truth, about the longing for your beloved one, the longing for the unity with the Creator, the longing for this unity, for being like whole, whole and like in your unity. And it's very interesting because the Sema is listening. So for them, and I was also, when I was practicing it, and as I was doing as a researcher, I always had to have this kind of researcher mind somewhere back at my head, because I have to then come back home, and I would write some articles about it, and be able to communicate, to find this natives terms, not the the kind of far scholar terms, but to find the ways in how the natives, how they, these Sufi practitioners, how they talk about it, if at all, because it's not, they don't talk so freely about their experiences. So anyway, I had many interesting kind of relations between the Sema practice and also the way we navigate in our life, because and it's very much connected to the topic of trust. The questions: can you trust yourself? And what do you trust really in your life, and what can you really trust in your life? I think it's a very interesting question that you can ask yourself, and this is what I do from time to time. I keep coming back to these questions. Okay, do I trust myself? And okay, do I trust life? And in different situations in life, there can be different answers. So but it's always known to double check this reality. Do I trust myself? Do I trust life? And so these whirlers, they have to trust the sound, they have to trust the music, because sound is the only thing that helps them to navigate in this room. They make a turn and they can hear again the sound coming from there, and then again the sound is here, and then they can really continue for many hours. And yeah, so it's very similar also in life and our practices of storytellers. Just as the Sufi mystic Jalaluddin Rumi said, he said that, oh, I want to become the flute. I want to become the hollow flute, the flute empty inside, through which the breath of the Creator may come through. So I want to become the flute that the Creator would play. I really hope that it connects. Now I'm talking very quickly because there's not always not enough time, but I hope that these things that I tell, that they maybe ring some bells inside of you, that they create some recognitions, maybe with the course or whatever your just life experience. If they do, that's great. Okay. So, and that being there in Turkey, I discovered that these musicians playing there in these small ensembles, in these groups, somehow they really know what to do. They are not really communicating to each other like, hey, let's play now this thing. And they're playing for many hours, for maybe 6 or 7 hours. And some people would change. And personally, once I was participating, during one summer, I was participating in the 99 days of Sema, which means that for 99 days and nights, the whirlers would whirl in the small special place in the countryside, in a very beautiful natural place. And there were some Sufi masters facilitating it, and also keeping an eye on it, and also musicians. And musicians were playing non-stop for 99 days. They will just change. Some others would come, and then again others would come. And and then then I had many conversations with different musicians, also with some very famous masters. I was just happy to meet there because they all came there for this very special Sufi ceremony. And and there is this interesting way of thinking about listening. So some of the musicians also mentioned it, that not many people can really listen. And while the musician is listening, for example, they say, well, you have to develop 3 levels of listening. And now it's something about musicians, but maybe you can also make some connections and see what you can use, maybe also what inspires you. So there are these 3 levels of listening. First is that at first you have to learn to really understand what you are doing, to really listen to what you are playing, just you and your instrument. And it's not very easy, because the funny thing is that there's always this gap between how we perceive ourselves and how others see us and how others hear. So for example, if a musician plays something, he likes it maybe, and it sounds good. But if he records it and then listens to it, he says, oh, it's bad, I'm out of rhythm, I'm out of tune, I don't like it. But while he was playing it felt like beautiful. And it's very similar, I think, with also this thing that I know some people, they don't want to listen to their voice sometimes, or some people say that they don't like to watch the videos involving them. But it's very important to just first you learn like to hear and to listen what you are doing. It's like in the first level. Then on the second level, at least for musicians, then you try to listen what other musicians are doing while you are playing. So it's kind of if we interpret it into the communication, then it's like what other people are talking around me. While in some places I have a pause, I'm silent. In some places I have to say something. It's like music, they are saying something and I add. And how now I try to listen to them. I know how to listen to myself, then I try to listen to them. It's the same, second level. And the third level for musicians, which is very difficult, is how it sounds all together. And this is really interesting, believe me or not, but most of the musicians, they are really lacking the skill. And also I'm not saying it as a kind of a person who have mastered it, it's like daily learning. It's a daily things that you try to slowly, step by step to improve. So this third line is how it sounds all together, and what is it that we are creating all together. It also, like for musicians, it also involves the sound of the acoustics of the space, but the most important is what kind of music it is. And now I think this is the beautiful place where you can interpret it again into communication, into your daily communication, into communication with your with your close ones, with the people who are close to you. Whenever we're talking, what is it that I'm talking, and what is it that kind of I'm, um, giving birth to? Then the second, try to understand what they are talking, what stories they have to tell, and just to sense when is the time to be silent, when is the time of your pause where your instrument is silent, and when is the time that your instrument says something. And again, and the third one is where it all takes us. What is it? Are we now maybe destroying the relation, and slowly but slowly, word after word, we're going into this destructive and very uncomfortable, and soon the situation will be lost, this threshold. Oh, we are trying to work and to create this kind of beautiful solution, or whatever, beautiful, non-manipulative, trustful, with a lot of honor, this communication that can really take us somewhere. So this is kind of a small idea of how musicians try to listen, how they how they yeah how they listen to. You can always ask them. It's also interesting thing that if you are if you're interested in listening, if you want to know more about listening, then ask people who do it. Just if you know some people who maybe do radio broadcasting, or maybe you know someone who has a I don't know, maybe some musicians also. Just ask them what how do you perceive this listening? What is it listening to you? And see how they answer, and see if they have a theory about it or not. There, it's very interesting. Uh, yeah, to find these people who are somehow have to be knowledgeable about listening, and just to ask them about it. Um, yeah, so I think that finally, at the end, I will tell you maybe a story or another. Uh, yeah, and then I will leave some space for your questions if you happen to have some, and for a small anchoring at the end, because it was also a long time and it's getting late here in Estonia. Well, I know. I think um, I'll tell you one story using this instrument I have here. Well, that was. um, this is an Iranian santur with 74 strings, and yeah, I brought it some time ago from Iran. While I was living in Turkey, I was also visiting Iran from time to time. This is really, maybe I can say, my favorite country. One of the most safest country I've ever been to. And this is a funny thing, just talking about this prejudice. And as I started in the beginning, I was also telling this story which was connected to migration. How my family migrated back to Estonia. And the funny thing that's about these migration stories is that personally, when I was living in whatever countries in Europe or traveling there, I had this kind of level of safety and security, which I would rank as normal. Well, somehow, I was feeling secure, but somehow, when I was in Turkey, and then when I went to Iran, I felt, wow, this is what security means. Wow, this is what safety means. This was very funny, because usually we have this perspective with this prejudice that, oh, these are very dangerous countries. Also, maybe Russia. Oh, it's dangerous to be there. But the funny thing was that, and well, personally, I explain it with kind of collective culture. But while I was living in Turkey, I was so surprised that, wow, now I know what safety means, because if something happens on the street, I was always sure that whatever happens, there will be 20 or 40 people running towards me, just wanting to offer their help, or I sometimes, or whatever, grab the robber, or there's this, the help was coming really immediately. So it's just to say that it's funny, but maybe not as you expected. But yeah, Iran and Turkey are, for me personally, at least, one of the safest places. And because so this is the thing of living in the north of Northern Europe, very individualistic country. Yeah, sometimes that the people are too individualistic. Well, but yeah, it always starts with yourself, sure. So it's an Iranian santur. It's very similar to a lap harp, but it's played with this mezrab, the hammers. So I think just I play one of the tunes. In Iranian music, they have a lot of scales, not just major, happy and brave, and minor, the sad and maybe thoughtful. But they have a huge range of emotions. So they have also around 46, 45 different scales for different states of emotional being. And their music therapy is amazing. The works on music therapy were written down in the 11th century. So you can imagine what was happening in Europe in the 11th century, who we were. And at the same time, in the 11th century, of course AD, yes. The people in Iran, they would write a really really thick work about music therapy, Al-Farabi. And the thing is that it's still used in the music therapy nowadays. So it's amazing. So there's one story that I would like to share at the very end. And this is also a story which is taken out of real life. And it's a story also about a big city. So there is one bus, a city bus, going at the end of the day slowly towards its final stop. And there were not many people inside of the bus anymore because it was already the end of the route. There was just a couple of people and one small boy. He was about 5 years old. And he was looking very small and very pale. And then the bus driver said, "The final stop, please go out." But the boy, he didn't move. And the bus driver again repeated, "It's the final stop, please go out." The boy didn't move again. And the bus driver said, well, where are you going? Why are you here alone? And the boy said, well, yes, I'm alone here, but I'm going to my mother. Can you tell me, please, does this bus, does it go to heaven? And then there was one younger lady. She came closer to this boy and she asked him, but please, can you tell me, what is your name? And the boy said, well, my name is Alex, but mostly they call me number 25. And the young woman asked, why? Why number 25? And the boy said, well, you know, in this orphanage where I live, there are so many of us that teachers, they can just keep all our names in mind, and so they give us numbers. So I'm number 25. But then I decided to run away from there. Now I'm looking for my mother. Can you tell me, does this bus, does it go to heaven? And the young woman said, oh, you probably have a very hard life now, don't you? And the boy said, well, yes, I do now. But before that, when my mother was still with me, she always used to tell me stories. And then she'd always kiss me before I went to sleep. And we laughed a lot. But then one day she went out of home, and she went out and she didn't come back. Can you tell me, does this bus, does it go to heaven? And the young woman, she thought for a moment and she said, well, if you want, I will take you home. I will take you, and you will be my family. And then I want to tell you stories. And I want to laugh with you. And I want you to live a long and happy life. Before you meet your mother up there in heaven. And at this very moment, the small boy, he hugged the knees and the legs of this young woman and hugged her so strongly as he used to hug his mother. And then the woman, she took the boy's hand, and then they went out of the bus. And they went together. They went home. And all the people in the bus, they were staying there silent for some time. And the bus driver said, well, there are no such stations and stops on my route called heaven, but I feel today that the heaven came a little bit closer. Yes, this is the story. So this is the story I wanted just to give to you. Thank you very much. And yes, now I leave it's for you, leave it for you. If you have questions, please feel free. We have still some time, and I think at the end, Leah will do some. Thank you.
Polina, one of the beautiful practices Leah does is she invites us to think about where a particular story lands with us. And that the last story you shared is it's just so magnificent the way that the music carried that story into my being. And I have a sense that when I hear that instrument played again, or I hear that particular melody, the story is going to become alive when I hear that. So just wanted to kind of comment about how that landed with me.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's very precious to hear this, and I'm glad that you felt this connection to this instrument and the story. The instrument is called santur. Maybe also hear it somewhere else later. And yeah, the story is just one which occurred in real life, and then I just gave it some storyteller's touch, and this is a story of a real person.
I thought it very particular also the way that you say the story, in the sense of there's almost like a candid approach to it, like that you're not bringing us into the emotion. The way you're speaking of the story really lets us live where the emotion wants to be lived, or where it kind of travels through us. And it's very powerful. It's very powerful, and I think it's a shared intensity, but very unique in each our reception. It's thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just so mesmerized by the whole experience of being with you today. So many strings of my soul were stirred and are probably stirring. So I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much for this lovely sharing into your own soul. Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are any questions that people have, we want to give you a little bit of time just to like consider all the different things that Polina covered in this amazing time. I feel like I went around the world and back and into the depths and into the heavens and back. And so if you want to, while we have her, if there's anything that you want to understand a little bit more of, she has so much expertise and mastery. I'm going to give you a few moments to ask any questions, and then we will get a rich time to give some reflection back about our experience.
I'm curious a little bit more about the music therapy from the 11th century, if there's any resources to explore that more, or if there's anything that you found that was helpful.
Yes, this is. Yeah, thank you, Amy. Yeah, I researched this topic because it's also a very big part of my own research that I do for my anthropology department. And well, there is, I think that one of the best resources that you can find if you want to like quickly get the idea of these different musical scales, which are very different from the West European and our traditional classical music, is if you go and find this music group. Actually, they are the researchers, but they are also performing this authentic Turkish music therapy. They are called Tumata, so it's T, and it's U with these two funny dots on it, but I think you can, while you're searching it's without. Then M-A-T-A, Tumata, or Tumata is probably having you. Yeah, it's one word. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Leah. So it's a group that I was working with in Turkey, and they are they did a lot of work at the end of 20th century and also now. So since the second part of the 20th century, to restore this musical therapy in Turkey, and they also were successful to get musical therapy into the kind of normal medicine. So Turkey is the only country where if you go to the hospital and you ask for music medicine, for the music therapy, then you will receive it just as any other medicamentation, so to say. So it's not bracketed with the traditional medicine or like folk medicine or art therapy, which you have to kind of go to special centers, and you don't really get this medicine in the normal hospitals. But in Turkey, if you are staying in your hospital and you need music therapy, then musicians will come. They come, and so Turkey was happy, to get this through, to get this kind of big project through, and now it's a part of normal medicine, music therapy, and I'm really happy about it. So you can find a lot of recordings that this group has on I think on Spotify, or just go to their webpage. Unfortunately, the master with whom I had the privilege to learn with, and who is also one of the main characters of my project, and the person with whom I did many interviews, he died a couple of years ago. But you can, his name is Oruç Güvenç, but you can just read about him. He was a really extraordinary person, of a very big soul and amazing musical talent. And some people say that maybe his mastery of the instrument was not, on the like the level of the stars, but he had this gift of choosing exactly the special music for the special people, and he was very successful with a lot of healing practices, and there are records of really amazing healing cases which took place there. So you can just look at their work, and maybe visit them one day. They have a very beautiful studio in Istanbul, and they're also doing so many concerts. They are reviving both the traditional Turkish music, and their main interest is active music therapy. Both passive and active music therapy, but they are doing it very, very actively. So they're Tumata. And also, I have to soon giving it over to Leah if there are no other questions. And I'll also be happy if you find me, for example, somewhere in social media, on Facebook or somewhere, and I'll be happy to be friends with you. Sometimes I'm sharing some stories there, and I hope to do more English storytelling. But every time if I write something, any post, then they're always in 3 languages, so they're always in English as well. So I'll be happy if you if maybe we meet somewhere on the social media spheres and spaces. And if you would like to listen to more of my stories and also to the kind of traditional fairy tales, then you can always find them. I have 2 audiobooks in English as well. If you go to music.polinastoryteller.com. So that's my Bandcamp account. And this is where you can listen to some of the music. I just didn't have a chance yet to put them all to Spotify or iTunes, but I'm going to do it very soon. It's just, yeah, the matter of time, basically. So
Would
I
you
hope
please
that
repeat music dot the site?
We'll send an email out to everybody afterwards that will have links to all ways to stay in connection with Polina. I saw 2 more questions, Katja, and then I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Kalum.
Yeah, Dominique.
Oh, that's Dominique. Okay, hang on. Let's say
Yeah,
Katja.
I'm not on the same thing that I used to be. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
Do I go?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. This was lovely. I'm having a question about there was were you in touch with traditions that were using improvised storytelling as a were the only story that was a traditional story, and in what you've been saying, or have you been in touch with the improvised storytelling?
I'm not sure what exactly you are talking about.
Like the story, like the story, you don't gather the story from something that you already know, but is created on the on the moment.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm in touch with this. Yeah, I'm in touch with this tradition on a daily basis, every evening, when I have to
Okay.
when I have to put my daughter to sleep.
Yeah. Okay.
Because she never wants to hear any. No, like recently, she's heard too many stories, and now she doesn't want to listen to this traditional folk stories. Then we had a very interesting period when she wanted to listen only to the story of my day, and that's at that time she was about 2 years old, and she didn't want to listen to any of these traditional stories. She had too much of them listening to me. And she asked me to what was happening during my day. And I discovered that it's so difficult to talk about your day because you know there are not many things happening. Even when I had to go to work, I would start telling about how I went out of the house, and I would go to the bus. And my story was very short at first, and she was so dissatisfied. She said, "No, it's not a story. Now tell me more." And the next day, when I knew that in the evening I'm going to have the same challenge, the next day I started to pay attention. And I started to notice what's happening around while I'm going to work. And this was one of the, I think, the best exercises that I ever did, because while my daughter was asking and requesting for these stories that happening with you with me while I was going to work, I started noticing many things, and I got many stories from there actually. Many of the stories that I tell, I just got them while I was looking actively looking at the environment and looking how people enter the bus, how they go out of the bus, what was happening in the bus, maybe listening to some of the conversation. So the next day my story was a bit longer. So the third day, my story was about 15 minutes. And the fourth day, I could continue with 20 minutes, just talking about the way how I was going to my work and, trying to do it really interesting. So it's amazing exercise. I really, yeah, the magic, to the mundane, yes. But it's very useful to, pay attention. I know that's actors do it in the theater schools. They also are inquired to notice what is happening around them, and they have to come every day and bring new episodes, new situations, which are somehow intriguing. Somehow there is some meaning to these situations. So it's a great exercise. I really suggest it's something that we can all do, and it's really
Yeah.
very helpful. Yeah. So basically now what we're doing she always asks me for a story, and it always has to emerge on the spot, and somehow when you do it again every day, when you try to do it, then already when your fantasy starts to work so quickly, then you can do it easily without preparation. But it's just it just needs, if it's something, I mean, of course, I think you were asking about something else, about the living tradition maybe of Tuvan throat singers. But this is what I answered.
We have
The answer is
one last.
really
Yeah,
nice.
we have time for one last question from Katja.
Thank you. I was just wondering, could you describe more what you mean with manipulating? Because I experience such authenticity, and maybe sometimes when I tell story, maybe there is a little bit of manipulating, or how to be authentic or not hide, and this purity, anyways, in what ways does manipulation come? Sometimes one doesn't notice, or one does notice but can't stop it. Could you describe more what you mean with manipulation and with authenticity in connection and whatever, something like that?
Okay. Well, just very briefly saying that one of the best examples of manipulating is when you tell, for example, someone, okay, you are going to watch this cartoon only after you eat your soup. And this is just the technique works also for the adults. When someone is, for example, there are many examples, but the thing behind manipulation is that there are some personal gain that you can get from for example, in the connection to politicians, and how politicians and marketing people are using the same tools of storytellers, and the same development of a story, then for them, they mostly pursue their own goals, their own personal goals, which are very often profit oriented, or popular, the kind of fame oriented, or whatever. And when trying to be in truth, trying to just staying genuine, there are two aspects of it. First, as you mentioned, I think, or you were mentioning it, that you try to be sincere, right? You're not trying to wear any masks or hide, especially when you're telling a story. You try to be sincere. And the other thing is that when you're doing storytelling, what is your aim? What is your goal? Do you try to kind of help the other people, and do you try to do some gentle magic with their heart, with their feelings, with their soul? Some time ago, I noticed that when I was telling some particular stories, then there would always be some men who would be crying in the audience. And for me, it was like, yes, yes, this is the moment. I did something right. I don't know what I did, but it was right. That even some men who just came maybe with their spouses to listen to a storyteller, and then suddenly they were touched deep inside, and they lived through some feelings. And so I think that this is what you can do. This is, you can just feel, and always to try to be oriented at the listeners, to see what you can give them, what you can offer, and especially at the time of not knowing, at the time of like we live now with this lockdowns and people getting this message that we have to separate, that we're not allowed to touch each other, that we're not allowed to stay together. That there are some very, very, very strong, very important changes are happening now concerning our life, concerning humanity, and there's big probability that the new game of the new rules of the game, can still continue. So this is exactly the place where I think where storytellers have to say their word. They have to always remind the people about fearlessness. Also being careful and taking care of the others, but I think this is the moment when people, storytellers, no matter if they're doing it professionally, or they just are real storytellers for the people around them, this is even more important. They can kind of unite to create this support, calmness, and some kind of strength. Yeah, I know. This is what I can tell you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, it was long answer.
Thank
It
you.
was very good.
And thank you for bringing forward the responsibility of storytellers in our time, and what it means to live in the authenticity of just that driving of authentic connection. I really appreciate that piece woven through so much, and so much for everything. I was weeping at one point, destroyed, I think. This is our opportunity to anchor in what we're taking away from today. And it's been I feel like I've been here for half a day. It doesn't feel like just 2 hours. And Polina was truly masterful in the way that she told story, that she led us into story, where she brought teaching, and so I want to give you an opportunity as storytellers to put on your scholarship eyes, to really take a moment to think, okay, what did you receive today in terms of an experience? What did you notice? And what do you really want to anchor in and carry away? Remembering that, as one person says something, there's so much to remember, you'll help others remember as well. And I'm going to ask you, because we're at top of the hour and Polina is in a much later time in her day, that we be generous in our using the essential language and really just bringing forth the essence of the point that we want to make. And then we can also place it in chat as well. Okay. Roxanne, are you speaking? If you are, you're on mute. Oh, you're not. Okay.
I can. There is so much I'm taking away with me from this. And you are so incredibly generous with the treasures that we can just even begin to touch the beginning of. So I just can't even say thank you enough, but this will have to be enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to say, like Leah, I was weeping at certain points too, because your style, your openness, your just your soul connection, just kind of reminded me and anchored me in my purpose as well. This whole idea of doing whatever it takes to heal and to heal others. So for me, what I'm going to be taking away from this beautiful session is compassion as a storyteller and as storytelling. So thank you so much for that, among other gems that you've shared with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You know, Polina, we live in such a harsh world right now, and I work with children. And that last story, I loved all of your stories. I love the story of where you came from, and there, you rooted us in. You got us hooked, and but it was so rich. But then to go on to the last story, for me, as working with children, you gave me hope. And I needed to hear that today. You gave me hope for the children. And I'm thank you so, so much. All you're a gift. Thank you. And what for you're doing for humanity.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to hear that. And good luck to with your work with children. Yeah. Thank you.
I want to share so much gratitude for everything you've shared with us today. And I know for me, I'm it's been reinforced for me with all that you shared, how sincerity in taking people on a journey through the realm of story and even talking about story is a journey, and music, and how they both entwine together so beautifully, but leading with your heart, and how much we can travel that way, how far we can travel to the depths of our souls around the globe, and how we unify when we do that. It brings people together, and that is such a powerful gift. So I thank you because I mentor both children and adults, and I will definitely take this with me into what I do, even more so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick add-on. I really appreciated also the rhythm of the story, like with periods of silence, and like the rhythmic of the music also is, it's like you recognize the sound, you waiting for the next phrase to come in. You kind of, there's an enchantment, and and I think that's it I was trying to say before, the way you kind of, you're not saying the story in your emotions, you're saying it in the word and in the rhythm, and we live the story. And it becomes a personal experience. And so thank you for your delivery, and for the respect that you give the stories, and to all the listeners to your story.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to add something quickly. I felt like you're like grandmother spider, and creating creating a world for us. And what I loved about it is that you're in one part of the world and I'm in another, and yet the flute that you were using reminded me of the Native American flute, the African instrument woven my background. I mean, I also felt like you wove in the animal world with the grasshopper. I could just see all of these threads being woven together. And I don't believe that I will be able to look at a grasshopper again without remembering the story. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I love most of all your authenticity and your simplicity and your sprightliness and your heart just coming out to all of us. Thank you. It was lovely.
Thank you.
Okay, it feels we have come to the end of this chapter. I think I can feel it's a little hard to say goodbye when you brought us to such a rich, nourishing. And Paulina, I think one of the things I'm really taking away is just that extraordinary, seamless ability to introduce us to place, introduce us to history, introduce us to you in context, and then woof, straight into the story. Such delicate weaving. And I'm feeling very full in every wonderful way. The way that we usually say goodbye is we take ourselves off mute and we give a little hoot and a holler and we throw some sunshine your way. And
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yay.
Polina.
Thank you so much.
So much love.
Thank you.
So
Thank
much
you.
love. Thank you.
Thank you. Blessings, blessings, blessings. Thank you.
Blessings. Be well. Stay well.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank
So much love.
We
Thank
love
you.
you.
Yes, we do.
We fall in love.
Yeah, we fell in love.
Smitten, as Leah said. Yes, definitely smitten.
Yes.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Sweet dreams.
you.
May this passion carry you.
I checked it will be a wonderful day. I know it now, but you will have a wonderful day.
Yes, we will.
Situation is wonderful.
May the fairies kiss you while you sleep.
Leah, I had a quick question about our group meeting. I don't know if you can be in contact